Good evening, hardcore metalheads and zombie assassins. This is Nicky G from Better Commander, and today we're going to take a look at Thraximundar. I couldn't find a ton of lore on Thraximundar. There's precious little, only that he's a 7-foot-tall slaughter machine riding a dreg reaver and slaying everybody for the pure love of it. He generates a lot of fear and just rides around Grixis, just slaying dudes and having fun. Thraximundar, 4, a blue, a black, and a red for a legendary creature, zombie assassin. It's a 6/6. He has haste. Whenever Thraximundar attacks, defending player sacrifices a creature. Whenever a player sacrifices a creature, you may put a +1/+1 counter on Thraximundar. His name means he who paints the earth red. Wow, so this guy costs 7 mana, but he comes down with haste. I think a deck where the commander costs 7 necessarily needs to function really well in the absence of the commander. You're only going to be casting the commander once or twice per game. You need to be threatening and have a lot of control elements, and we are in just the colors to do it. A long time ago I built this guy and it was deemed too mean to exist, but times change and I have the super duper fancy version of this card, so let's take a look at it. Mechanically, there isn't really much to go on. He has opponents sacrifice creatures, that's cool. You need to be a little selective about who you're attacking as he doesn't have evasion to speak of. The way I built it, and it was a little mean back then, was to pack my deck with threaten effects and sacrifice outlets. So we temporarily take control of our opponent's creatures and then sacrifice them for value. This combined with Thraximundar's sacrifice trigger keeps the board pretty clean. We also have some payoff effects to keep our hand stocked and lots of efficient ramp. So ramp for the early game, I brought a lot of the signets to bear, so we would have 2-mana ramp cards, a lot of that type of thing. Efficient ramp, soul ring, arcane signet, color fixing stuff, so that when it's turn 7 or so, turn 6 hopefully, or turn 5, we have Thraximundar ready to go. So let's threaten our opponents. Mutually assured destruction, am I right? So we're going to have several creatures that are very good at this. Conquering Manticore is a big 5/5 flyer, gains control of 1 creature when it enters the battlefield. Dominus of Fealty, this is just the deck for this guy. So it's got a wacky casting cost, but is a threat our opponents will be keen to answer. It's also a big 4/4 flyer. So at the beginning of your upkeep, you may gain control of target permanent until the end of turn. If you do, untap it and it gains haste until the end of turn. So note that this says target permanent, so you can target artifacts, lands, whatever you feel like. Molten Primordial. Not only is this guy a cool looking board demon, but it gets 1 creature per opponent. So it's 5 red for a 6/4 creature avatar with haste. Molten Primordial enters the battlefield for each opponent. Gain control of up to 1 target creature that player controls until the end of turn. Untap those creatures, they gain haste until the end of turn. So this guy's kind of a big swing, and the fact that it has haste can lead to some big life loss for our opponents. Lastly, Zealous Conscripts gets any permanent. Is a ghostly prison in the way of your alpha strike? Is there a maze of Ith preventing you from finishing your opponents? Well, this guy answers that temporarily. You could throw Kiki Jiki in here too for the infinite combo, although I didn't throw it in this deck. There are 15 or so other threaten effects, but I'll highlight a few. Mass Mutiny has Molten Primordial's text and has a mana value of 5. This is a really good card in this deck, or in any red deck. Mob Rule. This is probably the best version of this effect. So it's 4 red for a sorcery. Choose 1. Gain control of all creatures with power 4 or greater until the end of turn. Untap those creatures. They gain haste until the end of turn. Or gain control of all creatures with power 3 or less until the end of turn. Untap those creatures. They gain haste until the end of turn. It's an interesting conundrum based on the battlefield state when you cast it. Now, Domineering Will is an interesting combat trick that can get us up to 3 creatures or give an opponent a trio of blockers that can really screw up someone's board state. You can engineer combat to your advantage and leave the battlefield a smoky crater. So Domineering Will is 3 and a blue for an instant. Target player gains control of up to 3 target non-attacking creatures until the end of turn. Untap those creatures, they block this turn if able. I also like how in the art the Kraken is just mind melding 3 random fishermen. Slave of Bolas, classic card out of Shards of Alara. So 3, either a blue-red and a black for a sorcery. Gain control of target creature. Untap that creature. It gains haste until the end of turn. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So this is a sacrifice outlet and a mind control effect on 1 card, and that's what we want in this deck. Reigns of Power. This is another instant for 2 blue. Untap all creatures you control and all creatures target opponent controls. You and that opponent each gain control of all creatures the other controls until the end of turn. Those creatures gain haste until the end of turn. So if we have a sack outlet on the board, we can gain control of all of our opponent's stuff, sacrifice it for value. Speaking of sacrifice outlets, they're very varied and efficient as possible. We have the classic 1-drop twins, Carrion Feeder, and Viscera Seer. I don't know what people are thinking with the pronunciation of Viscera Seer, but visceral is pronounced like that, and viscera means guts, so I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, unless it's spelled backwards, of course, on a crazy chase card. Greater Gargadon is essentially a 1-drop and a great sack outlet. Village Rites, these little 1 and 2 mana draw 2 cards for a sacrifice, are great for sacrificing our creatures. So Village Rites is 1 black for an instant. As an additional cost to cast the spell, sacrifice a creature and draw 2 cards. Similarly, we have Altar's Reap and Deadly Dispute, so these are instant speed shenanigans to do something similar to Village Rites, and we want lots of draw to keep the engine running. We're going to need those 2 cards. So we have Altar of Dementia, Culling Dais to keep up the sacrifice shenanigans. If you wanted to get real fancy, you could certainly include a card like Phyrexian Altar in this deck, but it's like $100. Fling, I love Fling. So Fling lets us sack creature to do damage. It's a instant for 1 and a red. As an additional cost to cast Fling, sacrifice a creature. Fling deals damage equal to the sacrificed creature's power to any target, so target creature or player. Goblin Bombardment I stuck in there too. Sacrifice a creature, Goblin Bombardment deals 1 damage to any target. It's an enchantment for 1 and a red as well. Oh, the classic Ashnod's Altar. This is a free sack outlet to power out our bigger spells. We can steal our opponent's stuff and then sacrifice it to cast something of our own. Attrition holds a special place in my heart. This is one of the first cards I looked at when I started playing Commander. This is a great way to weaponize our threatened creatures. So we take control of their creature, we sacrifice it for 1 and a black, and then destroy target non-black creature. So you can a lot of times get a 2-for-1 that way. Disciple of Bolas is 3 and a black for a creature, a human wizard. When it enters the battlefield, sacrifice another creature. You gain X life and draw X cards, where X is that creature's power. So this is good if we steal one of our opponent's giant creatures, then we can sacrifice it and draw a bunch of cards. I love this guy, Crab the Unredeemed. So it's 4 and a black for a legendary creature, Demon, 3/3. It also has partnered with Regna, but we don't have white in this deck, so we can skip that part. So X and then sacrifice X creatures. Target player draws X cards and gains X life. Put X +1/+1 counters on Crab the Unredeemed. This guy can get pretty big, and it's great to hold up 1 black mana so that you can respond to board wipes and things like that. Grim Haruspex, Midnight Reaper, Harvester of Souls. These really like our creatures dying and will trigger when we sacrifice opponent's creatures because we control them. So these are going to help keep our hands full and keep the sacrifice engine moving. We can also put cards like Animate Dead and Reanimate to get out these cards that we've been sacrificing. So both of these cards can target cards in our opponent's graveyards, so we can get the big fatties that we sacrifice for value back on our side of the battlefield. That's it, really. This is a simple focus deck that can be built on a pretty strict budget. The land base is going to cost you the most if you want it to be optimized, all those dual color pain lands, fetch lands, and shock lands. This isn't like a super powerful deck, but it makes it very difficult for our opponents to do anything, and it scales with the power of our opponent's decks. At that point that we've kind of cleared the battlefield, we can finish them off with a hasty Thraximundar, and we should have a pretty full hand. So this is not CEDH, this is not even competitive EDH. This is a deck that scales with our opponent's threats and has a lot of instant speed interaction. So you're definitely going to want to add some removal, terminate Rakdos Charm, lots of efficient ramp, and you've got yourself a pretty nasty zombie assassin deck. So try it out, let me know what you think in the comments, you lazy butts. Also, this guy would be great with a zombie sub-theme because he's a zombie himself and is in the best colors for zombies. So remember, Thraximundar is not real, he can't hurt you. This is going to be Nicky G from Better Commander signing off.